as my heir, William now assumes the Scottish titles which have meant so much to me.
Across Britain, the tension is electric as Windsor becomes the stage for an unprecedented moment. Catherine and William step forward, not as heirs, but as king and queen, stunning a nation unprepared for this sudden shift. Some whisper of King Charles's fragile health. Others point to urgent behind-the-scenes decisions, while a few sense a calculated reset of the crown itself. Crowds gasp, senior royals exchange uneasy glances, and allies watch in disbelief. So, what really forced this moment into history? Stay with us because what happens next changes everything. When the crown quietly changed hands, the moment did not arrive with trumpets or thunder, but with words that carried weight far beyond the vaulted ceiling of Westminster Abbey. Beneath the same arches where King Charles had been crowned just 2 years earlier, the Archbishop of Canterbury delivered a blessing that many now see as the true turning point of the modern monarchy. His message was simple yet profound. The crown was no longer just an inheritance, but a responsibility moving toward those ready to carry it. Across the kingdom, the meaning landed instantly. Then came the image that sealed the day into history. Princess Anne, steady and unsentimental, stepped forward as the keeper of royal duty. In her hands was a newly commissioned Queen Consort's crown crafted by Gerard and Company. The royal jeweler tied to the monarchy since 1735. Set with Burmese rubies, sapphires, and diamonds drawn from Queen Elizabeth II's private collection, the crown spoke of continuity and earned trust, not spectacle. Palace officials later confirmed 2 versions existed. A heavier crown secured in the Tower of London for major state occasions and a lighter ceremonial version created for moments exactly like this. Catherine wore the lighter crown only briefly as the Abbey bells rang out across London. Yet that short moment reshaped how the nation saw her. Observers noted her calm, almost solemn composure. She was not simply accepting a symbol. She was accepting a burden. Within hours, the shift became visible to the public. William and Catherine arrived at Windsor Castle for their first walkabout after the blessing. Now operating not merely as heirs, but as the monarchy's active centre, the streets were lined with thousands waving flags and holding flowers, many wearing handmade badges that read, "For the future, William and Catherine." William moved with a mix of restraint and warmth, while Catherine, dressed in a dove-grey coat and wearing the smaller crown, met people with quiet assurance. Children passed her folded notes. An elderly veteran leaned forward to whisper, "God bless the new queen." Her reply was just as telling, "God bless the king." Behind the scenes, palace aides were careful with their words. This, they stressed, was not a regency. It was co-stewardship. King Charles III, now resting under medical supervision at Sandringham, had formally handed over day-to-day royal duties. The authority had shifted, even if the titles had only just caught up. One absence sharpened the moment. Queen Camilla did not attend, choosing to remain at Raymil House for what sources called private reflection. Her decision sparked quiet debate, with one commentator observing that while Westminster marked a new spirit, Windsor revealed who now carried it. Public reaction was swift. Social media surged with hashtags praising Catherine, Princess Anne, and what many called a return to duty-led monarchy. A YouGov poll showed 84% of Britons supported the transition as timely and wise. Catherine's approval ratings climbed to their highest level since 2022. International coverage fixated on a single image, Catherine bowing to Princess Anne as the crown was presented. CNN described it as the defining royal image of the decade. As evening settled over Windsor, William paused by the memorial oak dedicated to King Charles III and placed a child's bouquet at its base. Catherine watched closely. In that quiet gesture, loyalty met leadership, and the real twist of the day became clear. The monarchy had not waited for a coronation to change. It had already moved on, and the country was moving with it. So, what do you think sparked this silent transfer of power? Duty, destiny, or a calculated move? And who truly now leads? Stay tuned. The moment the palace axis shifted as William and Catherine offered a final calm wave and turned back toward the castle gates, the public saw confidence, unity, and purpose. To the crowds outside Windsor, it looked like a graceful ending to a historic day. Inside Buckingham Palace, however, the atmosphere was far more unsettled. The images already circling the world, Princess Anne presenting the Gerard crown to Catherine beneath Westminster's ancient arches, were being studied not as symbols but as signals. What had appeared ceremonial to the nation felt uncomfortably close to succession within palace walls. At the center of that quiet tension stood Queen Camilla. Official statements said she had stepped back temporarily to support King Charles III as he recovered under medical supervision at Sandringham. Her absence from both the Abbey blessing and the Windsor walkabout was explained as a period of private reflection at Raymil House. Yet few inside the system believed it was that simple. Those close to her circle suggested something deeper was unfolding. History, they said, was being written without her presence. Camilla reportedly watched the service from Ray Mill. One confidant later shared that she was moved by Princess Anne's words, but shaken by what followed. Anne's role was not just ceremonial, it was declarative. By placing the crown on Catherine's head, she publicly affirmed where the monarchy's moral authority now rested. Within days, that symbolism turned into structure. Palace protocol began to shift quietly but decisively. Reporting lines within the Royal Communications Unit were altered. Teams that once answered jointly to Buckingham Palace and Clarence House were now operating directly under the office of the Prince and Princess of Wales. Though officials described the move as temporary, seasoned royal observers called it something else. Entirely a constitutional earthquake. King Charles, still resting at Sandringham, was said to have approved the changes. Insiders insist it was Princess Anne who urged him to act, offering reassurance that history would not pause for uncertainty. One source recalled her words clearly. "You can rest, Charles. They're ready." That phrase spread quickly through royal circles. Within 48 hours of the blessing, Catherine's schedule reflected it. She hosted an informal luncheon for Commonwealth youth ambassadors at Kensington Palace. There were no crowns, no carriages, no pageantry, just conversation focused on education, opportunity, and innovation. The message was unmistakable. Leadership had already begun. International reaction followed. British newspapers praised her calm authority. Overseas outlets highlighted her work as evidence of a monarchy regaining moral clarity. Yet inside the palace, unease lingered. Camilla's private secretary, Fiona Shelburne, resigned days after the blessing, citing restructuring. Staff once loyal to Clarence House were reassigned to Kensington. One former aide described it as disorienting, saying the ground seemed to be moving beneath everyone's feet. Through it all, Princess Anne remained a steady presence. She visited the king twice that week, carrying updates and reinforcing unity. When asked whether the changes were permanent, her response was characteristically direct. "The crown doesn't wait for comfort, it waits for courage." The line dominated headlines and sharpened the contrast between Anne's forthright leadership and Camilla's silence. Whispers soon followed. With William chairing weekly Privy Council briefings and Catherine leading state-facing engagements, some historians began to speak of a dual monarchy in practice, if not in name. Unprecedented, yes, but not impossible. And with each passing day, it became harder to ignore the truth taking shape behind palace doors. And could Britain's monarchy be quietly rewriting itself with William and Catherine sharing unseen power? What does this hidden dual reign mean? Stay glued. When a blessing became a transfer of power. A blessing, many were quick to say, is not a coronation. Yet in the language of faith and tradition, a blessing prepares the ground for what must eventually follow. Those carefully chosen words delivered in Westminster Abbey were widely understood as more than spiritual reassurance. To the public, they felt like a quiet endorsement that the future of the throne had already shifted into new hands. In the days that followed, Catherine seemed to move with a confidence that needed no announcement. Photographs emerged of her leaving Westminster Abbey not for a formal engagement, but for an unannounced visit to a children's hospice. There were no cameras invited, no advanced briefing. Later that same day, the palace confirmed she would preside over the upcoming Commonwealth Youth Forum alongside Princess Anne. Commentators began drawing an unmistakable contrast. Camilla, Queen by title, remained unseen and unheard. Catherine, Queen by presence, appeared wherever duty felt most human. Those closest to King Charles III insisted there was no bitterness in the shift, only resolve. One long-serving aide recalled a private moment between the king and princess and in which Charles quietly said, "Let her shine. That's what your mother would have wanted." Behind that sentiment lay a deeper truth. Authority that had once felt delicate and shared was now settling with clarity. That reality became visible during a symbolic walk through the Sandringham Gardens, where William and Catherine met local volunteers who had supported the estate during the King's recent health retreat. The afternoon light cast a warm glow over the Norfolk grounds as their motorcade arrived. Greeted by gentle applause and the flutter of Union Jack flags, King Charles, resting under medical supervision, did not appear, yet his presence was felt in quieter ways. White roses lined the pathway. Parish bells chimed softly in the distance. This was not a farewell, but stewardship in motion. William and Catherine stepped out together, dressed in understated navy, a deliberate signal of unity and shared purpose. There was no grand coach, no ceremonial flourish, just two figures walking a path once familiar to Queen Elizabeth II. They paused often, acknowledging the crowd with unforced smiles. What began as a courtesy visit quickly became something more. Catherine knelt to speak with an elderly gardener who had tended the grounds for more than 50 years. He offered her a small bouquet of white lilies and murmured prayers for the king. She held his hand and replied gently, "He feels your prayers every day." Nearby, William spoke with young scouts, telling them, "The best service is the kind done when no one's watching." The cameras captured the moment clearly. Neither of them was waiting to rule anymore. They already were. Inside the main hall, a private reception followed, attended by senior aides and Princess Anne, whose influence had quietly shaped every step of the transition. When she raised a glass, her words were brief but pointed. "The crown is not a gift," she said. "It's a relay." Later, Catherine acknowledged that Anne's guidance had anchored them through change. As twilight settled over Sandringham, Catherine hosted a small rout with representatives from the Royal Foundation, the British Council, and the Commonwealth Secretariat. The focus was cultural diplomacy in a shifting world. Proposals drafted months earlier now felt prophetic, emphasizing education and sustainability over spectacle. Aides confirmed the ideas would feed directly into the next Commonwealth Youth Forum, which Catherine and Anne will co-chair. Sky News called her the monarchy's moral compass. Yet behind palace walls, not everyone was ready to accept how far the balance had already tipped. Now, as Catherine quietly reshapes the monarchy, can tradition survive her vision? Or has Britain's crown already found a new heartbeat? The quiet week when authority changed shape. At Clarence House, Queen Camilla remained out of sight, yet far from absent. Sources said she spent those days reviewing charitable portfolios and quietly reassigning advisors, working behind closed doors with what some described as icy calm and others as a calculated retreat. One insider put it more plainly. She felt displaced. This was not how she had imagined the latter chapter of her royal life, watching another woman rise. Not through controversy or ambition, but through years of steady, disciplined service that could not be questioned. While Camilla recalibrated, King Charles III was receiving daily briefings from Princess Anne. Each visit was precise and unsentimental. She brought photographs from the Sandringham walkabout showing William and Catherine greeting volunteers, speaking with children and listening more than they spoke. The king studied the images carefully. "They understand the people," he reportedly said. "That's what matters now." Shortly afterward, the palace released a single official photograph. William and Catherine walking hand in hand along a garden path framed by roses and the distant chapel. The caption was telling in its restraint, simply continuity in grace. The public response was immediate. European newspapers praised the couple's composure, with Le Figaro describing a new rhythm of royalty, calmer and more sincere. American outlets focused on Catherine, portraying her as a figure reshaping the meaning of the crown. At home, opinion polls reflected the shift. 86% approved of her diplomatic direction, many calling her the bridge between tradition and tomorrow. Yet, beneath the warmth of public support, a quieter reality was taking hold inside palace walls. Palace insiders suggested the king's convalescence could extend far longer than initially expected, effectively placing day-to-day authority in William and Catherine's hands. Official statements carefully avoided the word regency, but the structure spoke for itself. An unspoken pact had formed, protected by Princess Anne, accepted by the king, and sustained by Catherine's steady leadership. For Camilla, that pact meant remaining queen in title while watching symbolic power move elsewhere. Her place remained, but the center had shifted. As William and Catherine departed Sandringham under the fading light, a BBC correspondent captured the mood succinctly. The crown was no longer waiting for time to pass. It had already chosen its moment. Days later, the palace confirmed what many had sensed. Catherine and Princess Anne would co-chair the upcoming Commonwealth Youth Forum in London. Notably, the announcement came from the office of the Prince and Princess of Wales, not Clarence House or Buckingham Palace. Within royal circles, the message was unmistakable. This office was now the monarchy's executive voice for public diplomacy. For Catherine, the appointment carried deeper meaning. It felt like a coronation of values rather than ceremony. The result of years of preparation and restraint. She personally chose the forum's theme, shared purpose in a divided world, drafting it late one evening at Adelaide Cottage before sending it to Anne. The reply came back short and revealing, "Perfect. It's what we've needed for years." Together, the two women had become the monarchy's stabilizing axis. Anne, the seasoned guardian of duty. Catherine, the modern architect of connection. Preparations for the forum reflected that philosophy. Catherine pushed for substance over spectacle. Panels on education, youth innovation, and climate resilience replaced grand banquets. Scholars from Ghana, Singapore, and Canada were invited to contribute. Even the Gerard Queen consort crown became part of the story, with confirmation that its lighter version was crafted from recycled platinum and stones donated by Commonwealth nations, reflecting Catherine's insistence on ethical sourcing. Yet, as her influence expanded, Camilla's withdrawal grew harder to conceal. Several charity appearances were cancelled or postponed. And when asked about her attendance at the forum, a palace spokesperson offered only careful words of support. Within royal circles, the meaning was clear, and it was against this fragile backdrop that Prince William, determined to preserve family unity, quietly arranged a private visit to his stepmother. An encounter that would test whether reconciliation could keep pace with a monarchy already moving forward. But how did Catherine's quiet rise render Camilla nearly invisible? And could one private meeting redefine the monarchy's future entirely? Keep watching. The conversation that sealed the future. The private meeting at Ray Mill House unfolded without raised voices or public statements. Yet those close to it later described the atmosphere as heavy with finality. William arrived without ceremony, determined to speak plainly. According to sources familiar with the exchange, he told Camilla that she would always have a place within the family, but that the country was calling for renewal. His words were careful, measured, and unmistakable. Camilla listened, composed, but visibly tired. Her reply came quietly, almost worn by time. Renewal, she said, comes for everyone, and it never asks permission. When fragments of that conversation later surfaced in the Daily Telegraph, they were read not as bitterness, but as a warning shaped by experience. The balance of power had shifted, and there was no path back. While that chapter closed behind palace walls, Catherine continued to look ahead with remarkable clarity. Preparations for the Commonwealth Youth Forum moved swiftly, guided by her insistence that the spotlight belong not to royalty, but to the next generation. She personally commissioned a short opening film, refusing narration from any member of the royal family. Instead, young voices from across the Commonwealth told their own stories, speaking about education, opportunity, and responsibility. The final line, approved word for word by Catherine herself, carried quiet force. Leadership is not about who stands above but who stands beside. Within hours of its release, the film spread across social media, praised for its humility and purpose. Newspapers in Africa and the Caribbean described it as a people's crown moment, evidence of a monarchy finally speaking with rather than to its future. Even King Charles III was said to be deeply moved. Princess Anne later shared that he had watched the preview privately and sat in silence before speaking. "She understands what I tried to begin," he said softly. "Only now it will endure." Coming from a king known for patience and long vision, the remark carried unusual weight. It suggested not regret, but acceptance that his legacy would be completed through others. By the time official invitations for the Commonwealth Youth Forum were issued, Catherine's role had crossed an invisible line. Diplomatic briefings instructed international ambassadors to address her formally as Her Majesty the Queen Consort, designate an honorific approved by the Privy Council until a full coronation could take place. Royal commentators called it a quiet crowning, unprecedented in its restraint yet unmistakable in meaning. Without fanfare, without proclamation, Catherine had stepped into a space that could no longer be described as symbolic. Inside palace corridors, aides spoke in lowered tones about how quickly it had all happened. Princess Anne, ever pragmatic, dismissed the surprise. "History rarely announces itself," she reportedly said. "It just moves forward when the moment arrives." Her partnership with Catherine had become the monarchy's stabilizing force, allowing Charles to rest and William to govern without spectacle. Together, they balanced continuity with change in a way few thought possible. Yet, even as Catherine's influence expanded across diplomacy, youth leadership, and moral authority, the echoes of that meeting at Ray Mill House lingered. Camilla's words continued to circulate, interpreted now less as resignation and more as prophecy. Renewal had arrived, unstoppable and uninvited, reshaping the crown not through ceremony but through purpose. And with the world already responding to Catherine as queen in all but name, the final question inside royal circles was no longer if the transition had happened, but how soon the rest of the institution would be forced to catch up. Now, what did Camilla truly mean when she warned that renewal never asks permission? And how far will Catherine and William's quiet reign reshape the crown? Stay with us. When service outshone ceremony, every ascent leaves a shadow behind. As Catherine's presence grew stronger, those close to Queen Camilla quietly admitted she felt increasingly alone. She was no longer part of key strategy meetings, no longer central to press briefings. One aide revealed she still read every paper each morning, acutely aware not only of what was written, but of the silences. The absence spoke louder than criticism. As preparations intensified, Catherine and Princess Anne met for a final rehearsal at Westminster Hall. There they paused before the historic coronation chair once used by Charles II. Catherine rested her hand on its worn wooden frame and murmured that it still belonged to the king. Anne's response was immediate and firm. One day it would belong to Catherine, she said. But what mattered most was that it had been earned. A nearby camera captured the exchange, and when it was broadcast worldwide, it became a defining image. Not a transfer of power, but of trust. By the time the Commonwealth Youth Forum arrived, the story had shifted. This was no longer about transition, but transformation. Soft rain fell over Westminster that morning. Yet inside the Great Hall, there was a sense of quiet electricity. This marked the first major international royal event chaired entirely by Catherine, with Princess Anne beside her as the king's proxy. There were no trumpets, no ceremonial robes. Catherine entered in a tailored ivory suit, wearing only the smaller crown of service, its subtle gleam sending a clear message. Grace, not grandeur. Delegates from more than 40 nations filled the hall. When Catherine rose, she delivered no formal speech, only measured words spoken with warmth and conviction. She spoke of belief over borders and service as the beginning of leadership. The applause came unprompted and sustained throughout the day. Panels on education, women's rights, and sustainability replaced traditional ceremony. Catherine listened closely, asked questions, and joined discussions with young leaders from Nairobi to Delhi. Princess Anne watched with quiet pride, later remarking that Catherine possessed the rarest authority of all, the kind that demands nothing. That same afternoon, Queen Camilla made her first public appearance in weeks, visiting a literacy charity in Wiltshire. The timing overlapped with the forum, drawing inevitable comparisons. Catherine commanded global attention. Camilla's visit passed largely unnoticed. Sources insisted it was a deliberate choice, an act of dignity, but privately acknowledged she wanted to remind the country she was still queen. As evening fell, Catherine closed the forum with words that stilled the room. The crown, she said, exists not to rule, but to remind that compassion is power and humility is strength. The standing ovation lasted nearly 2 minutes. The next morning, headlines were unequivocal. Catherine was leading the Commonwealth forward. Soon after, Kensington Palace released a photograph of Catherine and Anne clasping hands beneath the Commonwealth banner. King Charles, watching from Sandringham, was said to smile through tears. "She isn't replacing anyone," he quietly observed. "She's restoring what was nearly lost." And in that moment, it became clear Catherine had not been crowned, but her reign had already begun. But what if Catherine and William's rise wasn't just tradition renewed, but a quiet revolution reshaping the crown? How far will their reign truly reach? The winter when the crown let go. Behind the scenes of public unity, another story unfolded in near silence. Queen Camilla spent Christmas away from the spotlight at Ray Mill House, surrounded only by close friends and her son, Tom Parker B.S. She declined the invitation to attend the Abbey service, officially citing health reasons, though those close to her suggested the decision was measured and deliberate. She understood the stage had shifted. One longtime aide put it quietly. She knew the age of her reign was ending, not in title, but in relevance. At Sandringham, King Charles watched the service on television. When Catherine appeared on screen, composed and radiant in restraint, he reportedly turned to Princess Anne and whispered that his mother would have approved. And didn't hesitate. "Then so do I," she replied. In that exchange, brief and unrecorded, a generational seal was placed on what had already begun. In the days that followed, protocol adjusted with striking speed. The Privy Council issued a directive formally recognizing the Princess of Wales as acting head of state for key ceremonial duties, a role never before assigned to a non-reigning consort. Constitutional experts debated the implications, but public reaction was clear. Approval surged. The country had already accepted the change. Christmas morning at Sandringham confirmed it. Crowds gathered despite the cold, eager for a glimpse of the family. When William and Catherine emerged with George, Charlotte, and Louis, the cheers were immediate and emotional. This was not distant pageantry. It was closeness. Catherine stopped often, taking flowers and handwritten notes. One elderly woman clasped her hand and whispered that she already carried the crown without needing to wear it. That afternoon, William and Catherine hosted a private luncheon for volunteers, nurses, and military families, replacing the traditional formal banquet once overseen by Camilla. The mood was intimate, grateful, and deeply human. One guest later said it was the monarchy they had hoped for. As evening settled, King Charles delivered a short televised address from Sandringham. His words were gentle but unmistakable. He thanked his family, singling out the Prince and Princess of Wales, praising their devotion and compassion as the living heart of service. Many observers described it as the closest Britain had come to a public abdication in modern times. That night, the family gathered privately at Windsor. William raised a glass beside Catherine and spoke softly of new beginnings earned, not inherited. Even the king smiled, visibly at peace. Snow fell outside, the first white Christmas in years. Far away at Ray Mill, Camilla watched the snowfall from her window, calm and reflective. A friend later said she understood the difference. Her crown had been borrowed from time. Catherine's was built from faith. And as Westminster's bells marked midnight, Britain crossed an invisible line. When morning came, the message was undeniable. The Williams and Catherine era ended the regime. So, what do you think sparked this quiet shift in Britain's monarchy? Calculated strategy, destiny, or a simple act of grace? And how far will Catherine and William's influence truly reach? We'd like to hear your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.